Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the non-tender deadline came and went, and one less surprising move, one that maybe wouldn't have been surprising if we had spent more time thinking about it, and one that makes us remember, wait, who? So we're going to talk about the departures of Cody Bellinger and Edwin Rios, and we're going to talk about what the Dodgers outfield might look like in 2023. That's what's on tap. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And today, that smart fans perspective is going to include a lot of talking about Cody Bellinger, what might have been, what might still be. And the only thing we know for sure right now, Vince, is that Cody Bellinger, right at this moment, is not a Dodger. And the crazy thing is because Clayton Kershaw's contract isn't official yet for whatever reason. Right at this moment, Clayton Kershaw, Justin Turner, and Cody Bellinger are all not currently on the Dodgers, which is pretty darn weird.
Yeah, it definitely feels weird, and especially when you think about it, Kershaw should be announced, or I would imagine here in the next week or two, depending. Maybe he wanted to take until after the Thanksgiving break to actually do it, or maybe he's gonna take lower salary if the Dodgers bring on a bigger name or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, Cody Bellinger, non-tendered, no contract, free agent. It's it was 3 years and 4 days to the day where he won National League MVP, and now he didn't make it through his entire rookie scale deal. So it feels weird. It looks weird. But no, I mean, nothing that we didn't expect and nothing that we didn't predict that was going to happen. And from what it seems, I don't know. I think when we talked about it last week and what we predicted what was going to happen, we both, kind of thought that he would get non-tendered, but we both kind of had hopes that he'd come back on another, a shorter term deal or a 1 year, like prove it type deal. But I don't know, for some reason, when the news finally came, it felt like Cody Bellinger is not going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the risk you take is once he's a free agent, it's up to him too. That's the reason that he might have been tendered, is because if they wanted him back, knowing that once they non-tender him, he's free to sign wherever he wants. He switched to Scott Boras early in his career, and Scott Boras is, it's not, Bellinger's not your typical Scott Boras client because Bellinger hasn't been good lately. According to Scott Boras, though, they've already had several multi-year offers, and they're not interested in a multi-year offer. They want to do a 1 year deal, which obviously would be a make good deal, send Bellinger back into free agency at age 28. And it is really weird. I think it's to my memory anyway, I think it's the highest profile non-tender for the Dodgers since Russell Martin after the 2010 season. And even that one was a little bit different because Martin, while he wasn't as good, he had definitely taken a step back. The bigger issue was that Frank McCourt was a cheapskate and didn't want to pay. And while this, I'm just looking right now, Russell Martin was only going to make, I don't know, $6 million or something in arbitration that year. I think if Cody Bellinger was set to make $6 million, the Dodgers would have tendered him. They would have kept him. It's that 17 or 18 million that he was likely going to make in arbitration. And we'll never know now what he would have made in arbitration. But we know it would have been at least about 15 million because that's as low as they can go. And so it's, it's not really even though the dollars were what ultimately decided it, this isn't a case of cheapskate owners. This is a case of, you don't get to be a billionaire who can afford to buy a baseball team. by making dumb decisions like paying $18 million to a guy who's bad at baseball. And while everybody, even Andrew Friedman, after he announced that Bellinger is being non-tendered, he still said that he has confidence that Bellinger is going to break out next year and he's going to be okay. You can't you can't really bet $18 million on that.
Yeah, especially when, with the Dodgers, it's not the $18 million like to pay, it's the $18 million against, the quote unquote, fake salary cap, which is the luxury tax, and, trying to get under that if they possibly can. Now, realistically, they can go throw 35 40 mil a year at Aaron Judge, and all this could be moot point because that was the money that Turner and Bellinger were going to get anyways. But that might be the casualty of it. But the other part too with Bellinger is just it was one, like you said, if it was 6 mil, they would have tendered him and or traded him because somebody would have wanted him at that value. But the 18 mil, it's just not the value that it brings back. And even with the defense, even with base running, you have to get on base to be valuable at base running, and the defense is good. But guys like we're going to talk about later, a guy like Kevin Kiermaier, who's really good on defense, not so great at hitting, those guys aren't making 18 mil a year usually. And that's what it came down to with Bellinger. And like I said, it's weird because it definitely felt like a lot of people were already saying goodbyes on social media, and yeah, he could come back, but it did feel like, okay, this is probably he's not going to come back, and then the wheels start turning on everything else that can happen, which is what we're going to get into in a little bit of who else can they go after, what else can they do, who's out there for trade, everything else, blah blah blah. And it was just like, all right, well, it makes it sucks, but it also makes thinking about the rest of the offseason kind of fun because now okay, we do need an outfielder now, and we do need a shortstop, and or we do need another infielder at some point, or they are going to go with the young guy, and maybe they use that money for pitching, or maybe they try to whatever the case is. The Dodgers have the last few years, they always end up adding somebody. Freddie Freeman came out of nowhere last year, but that was more of the Braves' mistake than anything else. But it's always like, yeah, the Dodgers, we're returning basically 80% of a starting lineup. They're not doing that this year, and that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And we are going to spend most of this episode talking about their options in the outfield. Before we get to that, though, there were two other non-tenders on Friday. One was Luke Williams, who, as you'll recall, I think it was him that when the Dodgers claimed him on waivers or however they acquired him, we made a point to mention him on this podcast just so that we could say that we had mentioned him. And I believe we even mentioned the possibility that maybe they put him on waivers again next week and we never think about him again. Turns out they non-tendered him. Makes you wonder why they claimed him in the first place. But I do think the waiver wire is often just a crapshoot. Hey, we have a spot. That guy might be interesting. Let's grab him. And if we don't figure out what to do with him in the next week, we'll dump him again. The one that was a little more surprising, or at least, I don't know if surprising is even the right word, but it came like we hadn't even talked about the possibility. And in hindsight, you're like, oh, we probably should have, is Edwin Rios. And we knew that Edwin Rios wasn't really in the Dodgers' plans because they never even considered calling him up last year, even after he was back from injury. And, once the Dodgers signed Freddie Freeman, Rios doesn't have a defensive position. He tried to make it as a third baseman. He's a first baseman DH kind of guy. And so it made sense he didn't fit. I was a little surprised that there wasn't some sort of trade market for Edwin Rios instead of a non-tender because he's not going to be making much in arbitration. I don't know that one. Did that one catch you by surprise like it did to me, Vince?
I was caught by surprise just for the simple fact of, like you said, it's cheap. Even if they tender him a contract, if it doesn't work out, you DFA him, and you end up paying whatever it was, less than $1 million or less than $2 million, whatever he was set to earn. And he's just interesting because he was, he wasn't lights out, but he was good last year before he got hurt. He had 7 home runs and 86 at bats. He had an OPS plus of 114. He didn't do much besides hit home runs. Those home runs and singles, mostly he did have only one double. But he was playing well, or at least to his, especially after the bad start to the year before, and when we found out he had the shoulder issue when he was hitting under 100. But it was one of those things where if he doesn't, hurt his hamstring, does he stay on the roster the entire year? Does Joey Gallo never come over? Does he hit, 15, 20 home runs? That's probably likely. So for it to just cut bait like that, it does feel weird, and it was interesting. Even if he doesn't fit in the future plans, just to cut bait with someone that has, or you would think has value, was a little bit different than I would have thought.
Yeah, and maybe it was just out of respect for him, of hey, instead of limiting your market here, now you're free to sign with whoever. I assume he's going to catch on with somebody pretty quick because he's definitely has the skill set he's a major leaguer. He's just not a major league Dodger, and so. But I have to assume if they explored trade options for Cody Bellinger that were never going to materialize, you have to assume they at least looked into trading Rios. But uh, we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about the Dodgers outfield, what it could look like next year. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to baseball, basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. For your next listen, when you're done with this, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. And jumping back in, Vince, like you said in that first segment, it adds a little bit of excitement with Bellinger being non-tendered because now we know the Dodgers have to do something in the outfield. Right now, if the season started today, they'd start with Mookie Betts in right field, maybe Miguel Vargas in left field, and James Outman in center field, and Chris Taylor back to a utility player. You have Trace Thompson in the mix. Obviously Chris Taylor can play the outfield. The bigger question right now is, can he hit? Uh, you know, there's internal options. So it's not like the Dodgers have to go sign somebody, but they kind of have to go sign somebody, right?
Yeah, or at least, or trade for him. They have to get somebody. And Chris Taylor, that's another episode for another day. But he's interesting because at this point, there's kind of three spots where he could technically be thrown in as an everyday starter: second base, shortstop, or an outfield spot. Now, you probably don't want him at any of those spots like full time. You kind of want what he's been doing, but beyond that, you got to bring someone in, and it realistically probably a center fielder or somebody that can handle center field. Maybe not as good as Cody Bellinger, but I don't think they want to move Mookie off right if they don't have to. And I don't think they would go after somebody just to exclusively play left field and kind of leave center open for whoever else. Now, James Outman is one internal option, Chris Taylor another internal option. Those are really kind of the only two internal options for center field right now that makes sense. And then after that, the world opens up to a wide variety of things. There's Aaron Judge, there's Brandon Nimmo, there's Michael Conforto. There's a bunch of these guys, and I don't know which. I don't even Conforto did play center field, yeah. But there's a lot of guys out there with names, but is that something you want? They all cost different things. And then there's guys you can trade for. There's other reclamation projects. And yeah, like I said, it just opens up a whole world of what are the Dodgers going to do? And at least for us as Dodger podcasters and Dodger fans, it's like, okay, cool. I don't mind seeing what they're going to do or what's coming next, or who's going to be that trade that comes out of nowhere that we're like, oh, now the Dodgers have this person.
Yeah, and one guy who jumps out when you think about a trade is Brian Reynolds from the Pirates. He's a center fielder. The Pirates are, not likely to pay him in free agency. He's a free agent after 2023. He's only due to make less than $7 million next year, and I think his trade value was hurt a little bit. He wasn't quite the ball player in 2022 that he had been in 2021, and by wasn't quite the ball player, I mean he was a lot worse. But there's also still a lot of potential there. He still hit pretty well. His defense took a step back, and so he's not a good center fielder necessarily defensively. But you know, I don't know. I go back and forth on the defense thing because obviously defense is what kept Bellinger in the lineup the last couple of years, and even Bellinger's defense. I think it's Jerry Hairston constantly on Sportsnet LA would say Cody Bellinger's still the best defensive center fielder in baseball. That makes me think Jerry Harrison doesn't watch other teams play baseball because Cody Bellinger's defense, while it's still good, he is not what he used to be defensively. You can see it on the eye test. There's some balls that he just doesn't get to. He's still very good. But if you watch a Dodgers Padres game and you come away not recognizing that Trent Grisham is a far better defensive center fielder than Cody Bellinger, you probably weren't watching with open eyes. There's several guys who definitely at least approach Bellinger on defense. Brian Reynolds isn't one of them. Kevin Kiermaier might be. Kiermaier, his defense was worse last year, but he also had a hip injury or something. I know he had surgery in August, and so he was hobbled there. And, the one thing I keep coming back to, Vince, is if you get a guy who can play defense, and even if it's James Outman, James Outman, I think, is going to be a solid defensive center fielder. I have concerns about Outman offensively. I think that there's a lot of people clamoring for Outman to get the starting job. And I think those people are going to be surprised to realize I think Outman's going to strike out more than Bellinger did because he struck out almost exactly the same amount as Bellinger this last year. And Bellinger is facing major league pitching and Outman is facing minor league pitching. So I think Outman is going to strike out even more than Bellinger. He doesn't have the power that Bellinger does. He has plenty of power. He's not, doesn't have quite the speed, but I think defensively he's probably pretty close to what Bellinger's been. And if you went that cheap route in center, if you imagine with me, Vince, close your eyes, picture this: Mookie Betts in right, James Outman center, Aaron Judge in left. I think the Dodgers only really have one big free agent in them this offseason. I think they could sign Judge and still stay under the luxury tax number if they went cheap, and cheap doesn't have to be bad. That's why you have a great farm system, is so that you can go with a guy like James Outman in center field to make up for the fact that you are paying Aaron Judge $1 gajillion to play left field. I feel like that outfield would be really, really good. It would be solid, at least solid, maybe better than solid defensively, because, Mookie's a Gold Glover. Outman will be very good. And I have no reason to think Judge couldn't play a perfectly adequate left field. And offensively, that would be really, really good. And I don't know. I feel like that would, I've been lukewarm on the Aaron Judge idea. But when I started picturing that outfield, specifically those three guys, I started thinking I might be more than lukewarm on the Aaron Judge idea.
And here's the other thing of that is Bellinger's been really bad offensively the last 3 seasons, and you look directly at Kiermaier, who was someone mentioned as soon as the Dodgers non-tendered Bellinger, and you think, okay, well, Kiermaier's always been a glove first, not really a big hit guy. He has better numbers, some better numbers than Bellinger. OPS plus, he's slugging better than Bellinger over the last 3 years. He's played as, almost not as half as many at bats, but still. And you think about, other than home runs, which is what Bellinger really, home runs and RBIs, what he beats Kiermaier with. You got to think like, okay, anything the Dodgers do to help out left field, and even with Outman in center, it'll be very hard for Outman to be that bad. Or even if he is, we already know the Dodgers can win 111 games with an outfielder OPS like 75 or whatever the case, OPS plus of 75. So that's the part, is you can upgrade left field, which is why last week when I talked about Teoscar Hernandez, that would have been 1 year upgrade in left field to where it lessens your need for an impact center fielder. And I think that's the other part too, is Judge is a big one. Obviously, that's the big fish, but you also open yourself up to other left fielders or other guys that can play, don't necessarily be center field. Or you go for a strong third baseman, and then you throw Miguel Vargas in left field, and then you kind of there's different ways to go about it. And I think that's the big part of this offseason, is there's a million ways to go about it. There's no right. I mean, there's the wrong way, I guess, technically, but that with knowing this front office, there's really not going to be a wrong way to go about it. And yeah, I mean, Aaron Judge at this point is kind of like Freddie Freeman last year. The more we hear his name linked to the Dodgers, the more you're like, I don't know. Maybe the Yankees aren't going to offer him what he wants, and maybe the Dodgers can offer him what he wants, and maybe the Giants are blowing smoke and they're not going to offer whatever. Or maybe Aaron Judge is like, you know what? I can't get past the Astros in the AL. The Dodgers have their issues in the NL. I'm gonna go help them. I don't have to worry about the Astros until the World Series, if that's the case. And boom, there's a happy, match made in heaven.
Yeah, it could be. And yeah, I do think if they do want to stay under the luxury tax, they do only have one big free agent in them, and maybe that's better used on a pitcher. Somebody who doesn't. We've talked about Verlander and DeGrom, who both likely wouldn't command as long-term financial commitments as Judge will. So maybe that makes more sense, and you do go with somebody more like a Michael Conforto in left field, to go along with Outman. But we're going to talk more about this outfield idea in just a minute. We're just going to take one more break, and we'll be back in a minute to talk about some more possibilities and what the Dodgers outfield might look like next year. So please keep it locked on Dodgers. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package theft spiked nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your SimpliSafe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News & World Report, a third year in a row. SimpliSafe blanket your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring costs under $1 a day. That's less than half the cost of ADT's traditional professional installed plans. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system we recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system only at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, we are back for one last segment, and we're going to keep talking about some of these possibilities. Vince, we've talked about a little bit about Brian Reynolds, about Outman, about Kiermaier. Who else jumps out at you as a possibility to be the Dodgers center fielder in 2023?
I mean, this is an easy name because it's probably the top after Judge is probably the top guy, but Brandon Nimmo, he makes a lot of sense in a few ways for the Dodgers. The one way you kind of have to figure out is where he bats. He's a kind of a quote unquote prototypical leadoff hitter type guy, but do you want to bat him second and or do you want Freddie batting second and let's just say you don't get anyone else, you get him, he's your main offensive ad this offseason, but other than that, he fits a lot of. I was reading earlier today, I think in Ken Rosenthal's article, how a lot of people believe, or scouts or whoever, believe that he's going to get better because he's a guy from Wisconsin, and players from Wisconsin don't get to play like year round, like players in different cities and states get to do. So he's still developing a little bit, and he's a guy, bat to ball type of guy. He can play solid defense, and would cost obviously not as much as Aaron Judge. Still maybe a little bit. You're buying high a little bit, which is something that the Dodgers don't normally do. He's a guy who's had some issues with injuries before, but did play pretty much every game last year. He makes sense in a lot of ways, but he makes sense in a lot of ways for a lot of different teams. And realistically, when you're the Dodgers, you're going to get outbid by teams that are more desperate than you, which is why I don't think he ends up being a Dodger, but he's a name that would make sense.
Yeah, it's even worse than what you said. He's not even from Wisconsin. He's from Wyoming, which is like even worse. Even worse. So yeah, he's already the third best player in history from Wyoming. So that's Wyoming is a tough state, and yeah, he's only 29 years old, kind of still developing as a player. And if you look at what he's done in the big leagues, Brandon Nimmo has done nothing but hit. The dude can hit. And, he's not going to be an MVP, but I mean, his OPS plus has been between 115 and 148 every year. Basically, he is somewhere between above average and good as a hitter. And his defense, he's a solid center fielder. And so, the downside of Nimmo, like you said, is he is the next biggest name on the outfield besides Aaron Judge. And so it's almost, I kind of almost get the feeling that Nimmo wouldn't be enough of a splash to make it worth. Yeah, I don't know. Like my mindset, I really have it in my mind that they're going to try to get under the luxury tax for a year. And so if you're going to sign a guy to a big free agent contract, feel like it needs to be a big splash. And I don't know if Nimmo, I almost feel like they would rather go with whether it's Kiermaier or, or Outman, somebody who's going to cost nothing or almost nothing, instead of a guy like Nimmo, who's probably going to cost, I don't know, what, 20 something million a year. I would guess he's looking for a 6-year deal in the 20 million a year range, maybe. And that's a lot of money to be going after a guy who doesn't move the needle in some ways that maybe, and the Dodgers don't need the star power. They have plenty of star power, and their stadium is going to sell out every game, most games, whether they have a huge star or not. But just for, bang for the buck, I'm not sure that Brandon Nimmo's the answer.
And that's the thing is yeah, do you want to pay a guy like Brandon Nimmo 20 mil? Now 20 mil today is a lot different than 20 mil, a few years ago. So yeah, it does he deserve to get that? Yeah, but does he deserve to get it from a team like the Dodgers who, don't necessarily need him? Probably not. And then, so you look at other people out there that the Dodgers can maybe make a trade for, and you know, outfielder wise, there's not too many. The Orioles might want to sell on Cedric Mullins before they hit. He starts getting more expensive. But they would be selling a little bit. He didn't have quite the year he had in 2021. There's guys like the Cubs, Ian Happ. I don't know what the Cubs are exactly going to do, but if they go after like a big name shortstop and maybe they want to save a little money here and there, and Ian Happ becomes that guy who we talked about at the trade deadline, who was, someone that the Dodgers could go after. You mentioned Brian Reynolds. Other than that, I feel like it's Aaron Judge or it's some sort of reclamation / piece it together. I know when AJ Pollock was, became a free agent, his option was declined. People thought about him. I'm not really advocating for that, but I feel like they might try to patch it together with what they have, or a smaller name reclamation project. Mitch Haniger, I believe we talked about before the show, a name that was mentioned. He's weird injuries and not as effective as he had been before, but there's still some talent in there. He's still young enough to where he'd be able to show some talent, and maybe he's looking for a 1 or 2 year deal to a 2 year with an opt out or something like that in order to build his value back up. So there's guys like that. But yeah, when you look at the trade market, it's a matter of, and then when you look at, Aaron Judge or bust, is it Aaron Judge or a big name shortstop or bust? Is it just Aaron Judge or bust? There's a lot of different questions there too, but yeah, I don't know. There's not a for real answer. And like I said, there's probably someone we both aren't going to mention on this episode that the Dodgers end up getting linked to or trading for, and we're going to be like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Mitch Haniger, especially when you mentioned AJ Pollock, because Mitch Haniger is basically AJ Pollock when the Dodgers signed AJ Pollock, roughly the same age. They were even teammates on the 2016 Diamondbacks. Weird injury history where it's like you can't really say he's injury prone because is it really his fault he got hit in the nuts and ruptured a testicle? Like, I might have to put a content warning on this episode now. Warning, we talk about ruptured testicles. So it's not that he's injury prone, but Mitch Haniger is a guy I could totally see Andrew Friedman going after. He strikes me as an Andrew Friedman kind of player. I do think, like you said, there's gonna make moves. Neither of us had ever thought the name Hanser Alberto last year before the Dodgers signed him, and then the Dodgers signed him, and it didn't work out. But So I'm sure the Dodgers are going to sign like Delino DeShields Jr., maybe trade him for Pedro Martinez Jr. later. And, but yeah, it's going to be somebody, and it's going to be like, wait, that guy? But yeah, it's one of the downsides of doing a Dodgers podcast is it's almost impossible to guess what this team is going to do. It'll be a lot easier.
Yeah.
The Pirates, you know what they're going to do. Anybody good, they're going to trade them, and they're going to, the Pirates are a lot easier to predict. Dodgers, they're really hard to predict.
Yeah, literally everything is on the table, from Aaron Judge to Mitch Haniger, like literally and everything in between.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that about covers our outfield talk, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll find some names or see some names in the next few weeks, and that'll be part of a conversation. But I want to say we mentioned most of the names that are out there or available or would be on the Dodgers' radar. And like I said, knowing Andrew Friedman, it could come winter meetings time, and the Dodgers are trading for someone we never thought about.
Can I interest you in Travis Jankowski or Tim LaCastro?
Timmy Lowe.
Yeah. That would make my sister happy as long as he takes off his shirt.
Yeah, he can get hit by pitches pretty well.
Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it for us today. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. There's going to be, we don't know exactly what we'll talk about tomorrow because in the off season, you never know what's going to happen. So there'll either be news or we will dig into more potential free agency. We hinted at pitching stuff today. We hinted at shortstop. There's a lot of questions for the Dodgers. So we're going to be with you every day to continue to talk about what the offseason might look like for the Dodgers. So thank you for making us your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. If you're not watching or listening to Locked On Dodgers every weekday, we would love if you add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love to hear your comments down in the comment section. If you're on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you through social media or email or whatever. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Twitter's still here. We weren't sure if it would still be here, but Twitter is still around. So we are still at Locked On Dodgers. I am still at Snider, and Vince is still at Vince Samperio. DMs are still open in all of those places. You can email us at lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail or a text message at 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.